No justice for Arbery. So there's a case where a young man was jogging. It was a African man. It was African American, and a father and a son came after him. They actually drove up in front of him and waited for him, and they came out with a gun and they confronted the man. The man tried to go around them. The guy, obviously, they got into some sort of confrontation, and the son shot the man who was jogging. And I look at cases like this, and I feel saddened by them, obviously, because the altercation didn't need to happen. But again, I feel like this is also one of those cases where it's just going to be overlooked, where it's not going to be taken care of properly and legally. I mean, not legally, but correctly. And the two men that were responsible for this, or at least the one who shot him, are not going to be charged. They're going to say self-defense. The man could have been armed. We suspected him of doing so and so. But again, this is another case where, again, a person who's a minority is against two people who are not a minority. And I don't see this being a case where those two are charged. And I mean, it's sad to say that, but I don't see the case where those two are charged. Not because they didn't do anything wrong, but because we live in a system that does not always convict those of wrongdoing, even if it's obvious. 25, Ahmaud Arbery was jogging, and he did this on a normal basis. He jogged around his neighborhood on a normal basis, and the accusations that they had against Arbery is they believed that he was going around the neighborhood burglarizing. Now, when they confronted him, he was in shorts and a t-shirt. He didn't have anything. He wasn't armed. He hadn't taken anything. He didn't have anything in his arms. So apparently they had chased him and asked him. They said, "Hey," they tried to get his attention. Said, "Hey, stop! We want to talk to you." But when they didn't get his attention, they parked in front of him, and that's when the son got out with the shotgun and confronted him. And it wasn't just a normal conversation or just accusations. There was a confrontation. The son who had the shotgun shot Mr. Arbery, and the father was in the back. I guess, part of this. The father was in the back of the truck, and I guess there's so the son was driving the truck. The father was in the back of the truck, and they pulled up in front of him and confronted this man. And again, I just feel like this is another one of those cases where they're just going to walk scot-free. You're going to have two individuals who walk scot-free. And the reason I feel like they're going to walk scot-free is because you're going to have all these stupid arguments come up saying, have my right to Second Amendments, all right? But you don't have the right to confront somebody if you think, they stole something, especially if they don't have anything. Well, they could have hidden it. Okay, so you're going to accuse somebody, or you're going to just assume that someone stole something, when, again, there's no evidence that he did anything of the sort. They had called 911 on him, and when the dispatcher asked him what has he been doing wrong, they just stated that he was jogging. And then they were like, well, I mean, there's been a string of burglaries in the area, so we just assume it was him. And again, it's a lot of it seemed like the assumption game, where it's just like, well, I mean, it seemed like he was doing something wrong, but again, when they called him, they didn't give him any details except for he's jogging. And he's like, okay, so what is he doing wrong? Well, he's just jogging. Well, okay, if he's doing something else wrong, call me back. So the details from that call are based, I mean, you can look up the 911 call and it'll explain more in detail, but that's the long and the short of it. He wasn't doing anything wrong except for jogging, but the two men thought of him as suspicious. So I guess, like I said, Arbery was obviously jogging around. He jogged around on a normal occasion, and so they decided to take matters into their own hands. And the father got a pistol, the son got a shotgun, and they went after him. And they tried to get his attention. They did not get his attention. So that's when they parked in front of him, confronted him, and shot him. And it saddens me because in cases like this, even when the evidence shows that they went out with intent, even when the evidence shows that they made assumptions and didn't ask questions, even when the evidence shows that what they did was wrong, I feel like who is it? Gregory and Travis, McMichael, are not going to be charged. They're not going to be charged. I really feel like this is another one of those cases that no matter what the evidence is, they're going to be like, well, he has a Second Amendment rights. He had reasonable suspicion. He had the right to bear arms. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with bearing arms. I have nothing against a person bearing arms. I have nothing against someone having their gun with them. But when they confront somebody with their gun and then expect not to have an altercation, that is asking for trouble. I mean, I don't see how someone can come out with their gun and say, okay, well, I just expect this person to freeze. You know, that person has two options. Either confront that person, or so the person who's on the other side of the gun has two options. Either run for their lives and hope they don't get shot, or try to stop the person who has the gun from shooting. And like I said, it wasn't like there was a conversation. It wasn't like, hey, we want to question you with the police. We want to ask you a few things. He said originally, the father originally had said, we want to come talk to you. But, I mean, I guess the guy who was jogging either didn't hear them or he just decided to ignore them. And they stopped in front of him and came out and confronted them with a shotgun. So, that's crazy. That's crazy. And, again, I feel like this is another one of those cases. I'm saying this 1,000 times, but it irritates me to have to say it. But I feel like this is another one of those cases where, again, even if the evidence shows that what they did was murder, that it wasn't just self-defense, it was premeditated, I don't think that they're going to go to jail for it, because they're going to have 1,001 excuses saying, well, what did he do wrong? What did Arbery do wrong? What did they have reasonable suspicion to think he was dangerous? And it's too often that in cases like this, that the narrative is always flipped to make the minority look like they're guilty of something. In the case of Trayvon Martin, it wasn't, okay, well, he might have been innocent. No, it's like he was armed and dangerous. And even though he was not armed, he was still dangerous. Okay, well, if that's the case, what if it had been the other way around? What if it had been 16 Trayvon Martin who shot Zimmerman? Well, he still would have gone to jail, because now he's a thug. But even though it was 30-year-old Zimmerman who shot 16-year-old Trayvon Martin, he was still the dangerous guy somehow. Even though he's the one who ended up dying, even though he's the one who was trying to walk home, even though he was the one who was minding his own business, he somehow still came out as the bad guy, because that's what media is really good at doing. Twisting the narrative to make one person look bad and the other person look good. And what the problem is, we live in a good guy, bad guy society, and when we have that mentality, we choose one person to be the good guy and one person to be the bad guy, which means even if they both do something wrong, we automatically make this assumption that one person's good and one person's bad, even though you can have both of them do something wrong or both of them do something right. And what the problem is, instead of seeing it from a clear perspective of what was wrong and what was done wrong, and if both parties were wrong, what should be punished or how should it be treated, it's a narrative of good guy, bad guy. That's why in cases where there are cops who've done something wrong, it's like, well, the cop is a good guy because I associate cops with good guys. So therefore, the cop wasn't wrong because cops are good guys. Therefore, I cannot see this cop as a bad guy even if they violated or did something wrong or did something out of the policy, because I see that person as a good guy. And with that narrative that is very heavily pushed in media, you have this idea that this person's good, that person's bad. And what it creates, especially when it's a narrative that pushes one side's bad and one side's good, generally and too often, when someone's referring to a bad guy, they're referring to some sort of minority or some sort of minority group. And if it's two people who are not minorities, then there's no bad guy. It's like, well, he was a good kid, and there was a dilemma on the school's part, or it was a dilemma on the hotel's part, or he just had mental issues. And so there's this idea of good guy, bad guy, and this idea is continually pushed. So in this case, there's that narrative. There's that narrative of this person's probably bad, this person's probably good. And I feel like, again, instead of actually looking at the whole scenario, instead of looking at this and judging it from good guy, bad guy, looking at it from what is morally right. Not who do I think is good, who I think is bad. No, who did the right thing, or what did they do wrong, and punish the things that were done wrong. Okay, we reward the things that are done right, but like they obviously confronted the man. They confronted the man. They confronted him with the gun. It wasn't like it was a conversation, and the guy was jogging with, like I said, he was unarmed. So there was a lot of things that Travis and Gregory did wrong, but I feel like that's going to be overlooked because of the good guy, bad guy narrative. So I wouldn't be surprised if, again, this is just another case where they look at it, where people look at it and say, well, we know who the good guy is, we know who the bad guy is. We're not going to look at the fact that Gregory and Travis overstepped their bounds. We're just going to say, well, this person looks like the good guy, they have a good reputation. We're going to talk about all the good things this person has done, despite them being the reason that a man is no longer living. Well, they were protecting their rights, and they had reasonable suspicion to do that. Okay, that's another person. That's another person whose life is gone because someone decided that person was a criminal, because someone thought that person was dangerous, and they didn't have a conversation. They had a confrontation. They didn't talk it out. They came out with the gun. And again, I feel like this is another situation that, especially in that state, because that's in the South, that there's going to be a lot of people saying, this is the good guy, that's the bad guy, case closed. And there's not going to be any more conversation about it, even though there's a lot of evidence proving that, Gregory and Travis overstepped their bounds. But I don't feel like that's going to be addressed. So I say all this to say, whether you're black, white, whatever color, it's not right to pursue someone because of what they look like. It's not right to judge somebody because of what they look like. You know what? To put it this way, a person's color should not determine how you deem them, whether they're a good guy or a bad guy, whether they're likely to commit a crime, whether they're not likely to commit a crime. You should be able to look at somebody and judge them for who they are, who their character is, not what you think they might do. But we live in a society where the narrative is pushed that if a person is a minority, they're likely to commit a crime. And that is a narrative that needs to be canceled. It needs to be disputed. But I don't feel like in this case this is one of those times that it will be. Because again, history repeats itself, and just like Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice, they're going to look at the person who has the different shade of skin and say that person was probably doing something wrong. Or the one I often hear is they're doing society a favor. It's not right to judge somebody by what they look like, but too often it happens. So I wouldn't be surprised if Gregory and Travis walked away from this and didn't even get a charge. Nothing, no type of conviction, nothing. And it's very likely that from cops all the way down to civilians who feel that their Second Amendment right is being threatened. It's so often that you have a person who has a gun, who feels like they feel the need to take the law into their own hands or take matters into their own hands, and they walk away. I don't have a problem with someone having having their gun rights and being able to bear arms. I have a problem with the way it's treated in cases where a person is not a minority and they favor that person over the person who is a minority, because so often there are cases where a minority has the right to bear arms and the same thing happens. They will defend themselves. They will use their right to bear arms to defend themselves, and people will look at it and say, well, sorry, you're the bad guy in this case. You're probably trying to be thuggish. You deserve to go to jail. So I say all this to say, it's a sad world we live in today. We don't live in a world without bias. We don't live in a world that treats everyone equally. I wish we did, but we don't. And there might be another case where there is no justice for Arbery. So I really would like to say there's going to be justice for Arbery, that people are going to actually look at this case and see the wrongdoing that was done here. But I feel like this is another case where there's not going to be any justice for Arbery. There's not going to be justice for Arbery. No justice for Khalil. No justice for Tamir Rice. No justice for Trayvon Martin. And again, those are all different cases, but it's the same narrative. And maybe I shouldn't bring those cases into this narrative, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that too often, minorities in this case, or in any situation, are not given the benefit of the doubt. They're not given a chance to prove that they're innocent. Instead, people just assume they're guilty and don't listen to the story afterwards. And because of that, you have a lot of cases where people walk away from murdering someone, honestly, because they did not give the other person who had a different shade of skin a chance. So, I say all that to say, the system we live in today needs to change, but I don't know how. I would love to give suggestions, but I don't know how to change it. I just know that I wouldn't be surprised if Arbery doesn't get justice again. Or not again, but if Arbery doesn't get justice. And if it looks like a lot of the other cases where a person wasn't given the benefit of the doubt and the case wasn't looked into. So that's all I have to say. Just think about it. That's about it. Love y'all. Love people. Accept people for who they are. Don't judge a book by its cover. And learn to accept others. That's about it. God deuces.